welcome to December. Here we are in the very last month of 2022. This one went really quick, didn't it? Yeah, wow. So, our series this month is called The Heart of Christmas. And I don't usually use Christmas per se in my series names because we celebrate all of the holidays this time of year. We have Hanukkah and Diwali and Kwanzaa and Christmas, of course, and the winter solstice. So we celebrate all of those, but Christmas has become so institutionalized and commercialized, and it does bring to mind hot cocoa and Hallmark movies and cookies and all of that stuff. So we're doing the heart of Christmas this year, and we'll be talking about all these other holidays as well. Today, my talk is a touch of magic. A touch of magic. And we're going to be looking at the magic of this time of year as well as its mystical roots. And Lily so beautifully alluded to both of those in her song. So I want to ask, what's your favorite seasonal story? There's so many of them, aren't there? I mean, there's a tremendous amount of them as you begin to dig into them. Many of us were raised on one story, right? Be it Hanukkah or Christmas, but there are so many different stories. Is yours the mystical nativity, where we've got stars and kings and intrigue and angels and the virgin birth? Or maybe it's that little jar of oil that should have lasted one day that lasted 8 days. Or could it be the mystery of Stonehenge? Could it be the mystery of Stonehenge and the solstice? Or perhaps it's the magic of flying reindeer, especially one named Rudolph. Or maybe it's that magic little silk hat that made the snowman dance. Or could it be old Santa and his elves? Is that a favorite story? Or maybe his sinister counterpart, Krampus. Have you ever heard of him? Yeah, he's kind of now. I didn't even bring a picture of him. He's not pretty. Perhaps it's the story of the Who's of Who Village as they converted the Grinch's stone cold heart into something warm and beating in his chest. Or maybe it's the conversion of Mr. Scrooge and the ghost of Christmas. So many stories. So many stories this time of year on these long winter nights. I believe that because of ancestry, before electricity and internet and entertainment, we entertained ourselves, didn't we? We entertained ourselves with stories. And so we are connected to all of these old stories. There's no time or space in them. We heard them growing up. We hear them and we see them today. Our parents and grandparents and great grandparents and so forth and so on are familiar with most of these stories. Maybe not the Grinch, that one's relatively new, but it's woven into our society now, isn't it? We all know what it means to call someone a Grinch for Christmas or Mr. Scrooge. They're acting miserly or bah humbugging and stealing the joy from the holiday. These things are woven into our overall consciousness. Now, this Jewish holiday of Hanukkah is not one of the holidays that's talked about in the Bible. Remember Passover? Big deal, right? It's a big deal in the Bible. And Hanukkah's not mentioned. The battle for the temple occurred in 168 BC. Now, the Greeks had come in and defeated the Jewish people and took their temple, their sacred place. And they started populating it with all of the Greek gods. And they put out the light and all of that. And the Maccabees came and they said, hey, we're not going to have this. They were a big warrior family, and they took them on and they booted them back out and sent them back to Greece. And they went in to clean the temple, and the temple had been desecrated from all of the unholy things that they thought were in there. And as part of the temple, the light had to be on all the time. And somebody probably knows the right name for it. I'm going to call it the menorah, but I don't think that's what it was called then. But they had to light that. And all that they found in the temple when they got back in there was one little vial of oil that was supposed to last one day. And they were a little panicked because this light had to be on 24/7. That's part of the sacredness of the temple. Plus, they needed to see to clean it. And so they sent a messenger to go find more oil. Day 1, day 2, day 3, no messenger. And the light keeps burning from this little vial of oil. Finally, 8 days later, the messenger arrives with more oil. And the rabbis then said, this is the miracle of the oil, the Hanukkah, the 8-day blessing of the 8-day miracle of the oil. And that's where we get the celebration of the 8 nights of Hanukkah, is through that story. Now, the interesting thing is that the battle is talked about, but the actual oil story didn't come about for centuries after the battle stories were talked about. So we've improvised a little, we've expanded a little on the stories and what happened. What about the Nativity? We know that story pretty well, don't we? It's written about in what, 2 books in the Bible, Matthew and Luke. Now, if you've ever read those 2, they conflict with each other. They're not the same story. They're a little different. The details are different. And things like the 3 wise men or kings, it doesn't really say 3, and it doesn't say what they are. So things like that we've sort of improvised and expanded into this beautiful nativity pageant that we have now with all of the animals and the barn, all of those things, right? We've expanded that story over these 2,000 some years. So all of this storytelling, what does it mean? Particularly this time of year. Do you notice there's a lot of stories around this time of year? Anthropologists tell us that storytelling is central to our very human existence. It's common in all cultures. Everybody on the planet tells stories. Why? Why do we tell stories? They say that it is a symbiotic exchange between the teller and the listener. If you're telling a story, you're pulling it from memory. You're trying to use words that draw pictures. You're engaged. If you're listening to the story, you're absorbing the words, maybe the body language of what's happening, and you're envisioning and using your imagination, that power of mind that Lily talked about, to live that story, to maybe put yourself in it. So it's the symbiotic back and forth relationship of story that we have. And they say that we start learning this in infancy. Think of the fairy tales that you've learned. The 3 pigs. Red Robin. Red Robin? Robin. No. Little Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood. I remember the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood. Cinderella, the little train that could. We learned all these stories as little kids, but we still know them. We know the message that was contained in them, don't we? Yeah, I think I can. I think I can. Campbell's The Hero's Journey. Classic. Classic. We use stories to make sense of our world, to understand, to fill in all the gaps about what we truly know, right? We use story to fill that in. For example, there was a study in 1944. It's been repeated several times since then. But in 1944, they had 34 students from Massachusetts colleges. And they showed them a short video and asked them what was happening in this video. The film showed 2 triangles, a circle moving about on a 2-dimensional surface. And the only other object was off screen. And I bet that didn't turn out because it was so light. It's a rectangle with 3 sides. One side of it's open in the rectangle. And the rectangle was stationary. The other 3 items moved around on the page. And so they said, what's happening? What is this? Only one of the 34 students said it's geometric forms on a plane. Everybody else made up these elaborate stories about what was happening on the screen. Let me tell you what they said. The triangles were two men fighting, and the circle was a woman trying to escape the bigger bullying triangle. Instead of registering inanimate objects, they're imagining humans with vivid inner lives. The circle was worried. The circle and the little triangle were innocent young things. And the big triangle was blinded by rage and frustration. Can you imagine? It's our mind wanting definition. What does this mean? Oh, it must mean some deep psychological test that I have to say what's happening on those things. We want to give it meaning. And that's what these students did. They made up meaning for that. So when you look at, what do you see? Geometric shapes, right? But yet, can you make up a story about them? Yeah, sure we could. We could all make up stories about them. What does it mean? What does this thing, event, experience, or circumstance mean in my life? Why? We see prayer requests, hear prayer requests. I need clarity. I need to understand why this is happening. I need clarity in my life. Many years ago, there was a practitioner in our organization who became very ill very quickly. And it was very mysterious. She ended up in the hospital, and it was very mysterious. They couldn't figure out what was going on in her body. And she was deteriorating very, very quickly to the point of demise. And there was a prayer circle with her of practitioners and ministers. And one of the ministers asked, she said, "What would you like prayer for?" And she said, "I want to know why. I want to know why I'm sick, why my body is ill, why this is happening to me." She didn't say, "I want to be healed." She didn't say, "I want to move beyond this." She said, "I want to know why." So it's that deep question within us to understand why. And when we don't understand why, our mind and our beautiful imagination makes something up, doesn't it? It makes up something to comfort us, something that is acceptable to us. Ernest Holmes tells us in The Science of Mind that we can't always know. We can't always know. Some things we simply have to take on faith. We simply have to take on faith. We don't really know our origin. We have scientific theories. We have creation theories and a whole bunch of stuff in between. But for sure, for certain, for how the first human, 2 humans, 5 humans, 5,000 humans, we don't know. That wasn't there. And when we die, we'll know when we get there. But until then, we accept theories, we accept others' ideas, we accept our own intuition, we accept our own experiences perhaps that we've had, but we don't know. But our mind needs comfort in some explanation of that we can hold on to. So we make it up. In my research this week, I came across 6 mysteries of the world, unsolved mysteries of the world. Think about what these mean. See where your mind goes. The Bimini Road. I had heard of some of these I hadn't, so I'm going to share these. The Bimini Road. It's this right here. It's a rock formation that baffles divers in the Bahamas and has for years. They don't know what it is or why it is, but it's a roadway under the ocean. It's been hypothesized that perhaps it is the discovery of the lost city of Atlantis. Edgar Cayce actually prophesied that we would find it near Bimini. But We don't know what it is. Piri-Reis map. It's this map in the middle. This was drawn in 1513, and it shows what appears to be the Antarctic coast. We believe the Antarctic coast was not discovered until 1820, some 300 years later. Did he discover it? Did he dream it? Where did this map come from? Of course, we all know about Stonehenge, right? It's a strange circle of stones that dates back to approximately 2000 BC. 4,000 years ago. Each piece weighs about 50,000 pounds, and each came from a location about 200 miles away. How'd they get there? How'd they move them? With the technology or lack of it that was available 2000 BC? How did it get there? The Shroud of Turin, it's believed to be the cloth that Jesus' body was wrapped in after his crucifixion. Leaving Jesus inside the shroud created an imprint of his face and much of his body. Do we have DNA matching? Nazca lines in Peru. Mysterious lines in the earth were first discovered in 1553 and cover over 170 square miles. Very deliberate patterns created by lines that form shapes of animals. Can you see the whale? Tail, head? Isn't that amazing? Hummingbirds, whales, all sorts of stuff. How did they do that when they had no aerial view? 170 square miles. And finally, there's the Voynich manuscript, which has baffled linguists and cryptographers since it was first discovered in the early 1900s. The illustrated codex has about 240 pages, and despite the efforts of the best code breakers and computers, no one's been able to conclusively crack the code or translate the unknown language. Who wrote it? What's it mean? What's it say? 6 of the unsolved mysteries. These are the things that movies are made of, aren't they? Did you make up a movie? Did you make up a story? How did it happen? Was it all attributable to aliens, something outside of our human capacity? Or is there some infinite possibility at play that's got this stuff happening? Is it fun to play with your imagination? Yeah, can be. This is how we create. This is how our minds work. We want answers. How did that get there? How did it happen? Where did it come from? What does it mean? I need to know. Ernest Holmes, the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and the author of The Science of Mind, defines mysticism. He says the inward awareness of the divine presence in all things. In other words, our oneness. Our oneness. And isn't that really what this season is all about? What the holidays are all about? Is oneness and recognizing that divine presence in each other and everything that exists. It's the connecting around the central flame of community, like the Greyhawk Street. That's a wonderful community event of congregating and collecting around community and everyone. There's 28 days that every family, every person that lives there is actively engaged. They're either collecting food and things and money and manning the hot chocolate stations, making sure their lights are all on, taking the time to decorate, to purchase the decorations, to then take them down. That's a community effort, isn't it? It's a community effort. We gather with our friends and our family. We have holiday rituals and practices, be it religious traditions or family traditions, things that we do. My mom used to always every year make custard, homemade custard. And it was cold enough in Virginia growing up that she always hung it outside. She had a bucket she made it in, and she'd cover it with cheesecloth. And then she'd hang the bucket outside so that it would get crystals, ice crystals in it and frozen. And it was so good. You had to scoop it out with a scoop, and it was like a plop of frozen pudding. And some neighbors that live next to us now live in the Atlanta area. And I got a Facebook contact from her just last week. She said, we're just sitting here thinking about and talking about your mom's custard, because everybody knew about mom's custard. And so I thought this year, I think I might make that. It's not cold enough here to get frozen ice crystals on, but I think I might make it. So that was kind of one of those fun traditions. And that's what it's about, isn't it? Is the ritual and the tradition. And maybe it's not the same as they used to be. But what are your traditions and what are your rituals that you celebrate during this time? Because this time of year is that ending of the year, and it's the darkness that's coming in. And you notice that it's 5:15, I think the sun sets tonight. It's just getting darker and darker and shorter, and it feels like it's just closing in. And with our ancestors, we gathered together around the fire and shared our meager resources that we had, and to protect against the critters and all those things. And we told those stories. But we knew that something was coming. There's an expectation. And we've capitalized on that with the Christmas and the giving and the gifts and all those things that happen. It's like this expectation, this anticipation of the birthing of something new that's coming. And that's what's so fun about this month of December. Yes, it's getting dark and cold and rainy and all that stuff, but there's something coming. There's something coming. The light is returning, and the growth and the expansion and the green shoots, longer days. It's returning. It's coming. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. So I hope you're planning to be with us all month as we celebrate this season, these holidays, these holy days throughout the month of December. I want to take a look at our practicing the principles this morning, give you something to take home and play with, to discover the magic and the mystery of this wonderful holiday season. If you have not signed up for Mindful Monday and you'd like to participate in that, it's a Monday morning newsletter that I send out that's a recap of the talk today, details on these practicing the principles. You can sign up in the lobby, online, or use our QR code here. Send me an email. We'll get you on that list. Number one, look for the magic of the holidays. Look for the magic of the holidays. It can be easy to kind of slip into the hustle and bustle of the holidays and become a little Scrooge-ish or Grinch-ish and all that good stuff. But this week, I'm going to invite you to pause with the intention of noticing the lights, the decorations, to actually experience that, to participate in it. I mean, we look around this room, we've got this beautiful tree, and we've added the lights this year, which we haven't had before, and we've got some festivities happening here. It's exciting to see the presents coming up under the tree. So pause and experience the lights and the decorations. Call your friends, reactivate those old traditions, start new ones, send out the Christmas cards, get a photo with Santa, do something fun, festive, and look for the magic in the holidays. Be open to the experience. Number two, contemplate the mystical. Contemplate the mystical. Spend some time in silent contemplation of the mystical things of this season. There's lots of them. The solstice and the darkness, the meaning and the importance of the return of the light. What's being birthed in you during this season of darkness? It's like the seed in the soil. It just goes into the dark, but then it bursts forth and comes up. What's being birthed in you this season? Connect with the Christ child within and notice that. Go outside in the evening. Look at the stars. Look at the stars. See which one's guiding you. Be grateful for the gifts of spirit such as Hanukkah oil, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Those are all examples for us of the gift giving. Being good receivers, right, Demita? We've got to be good receivers too. It's a circulation. Number three, create meaning. Dust off your holiday traditions or create new ones. Find meaning in the season for you. Find meaning in the season for you. So let's close with a quote from mystic Meister Eckhart. Ernest Holmes loved Meister Eckhart. He says, there are many people who have sought light and truth, but they look for it outside themselves where it is not. When one turns to God, at once a light begins to glimmer and shine within. We know more than we were ever taught. Yes. So this week, let's turn within and experience the mystical magic of the holidays. And so it is. And it is your turn. Yes, now I get to hear from you. So, what is it about the mystical and the magical that you want to talk about? Oop, this is squeeze. Or just didn't have my Wheaties this morning. Thank you, Joe. Okay, what would you like to talk about? Mystical, magical, holidays, story. Valerie? Yeah. You're going to have to step out of here, hon.
Happy holidays, everyone. The mystic of Jesus' birth and today's life. Can you elaborate on where it started there and how we can integrate his birth to where we are today?
Okay. Um, the interesting thing about Jesus' birth is Jesus' birth wasn't celebrated for 300 or 400 years after his death, because the early Christians thought he was the savior, political savior of them. And so they didn't, it's like, we're all going to die anyway. It's the end of the world when this is happening, and he's not going to be so it was a time frame in there for 200-300 years that they just didn't celebrate anything. And then when Christianity began to take off under Paul's leadership, that's when they went back and began to celebrate and celebrate that easy for me to say, nativity and birth of him. Now, this also ties into many prior ancient celebrations, again, around this winter solstice, around this return of the light, around the birthing of something new. And it's said that, Jesus' birth is the birthing of the Christ consciousness within humanity, that we're going from the law society of Moses into the new covenant of Jesus' teaching. And so he was the representative of the birth of that consciousness into the world. So expand on your question beyond that history and how we live it today. Is that?
With the Christian belief system compared to our new thought of being.
Yeah.
It's like people would say, "What do you believe in Jesus?" Well, I believe he lived, and he he was a prophet of religion. But how do we continue to live forward with our new way of thinking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The new thought thinking is that Jesus is a master teacher. His teaching and what he brought as far as consciousness to the world, and that expansion of love. Moses was love God, period. Jesus is love God and each other. So it's more of a loving message that his ministry was. And so in New Thought, we don't believe that he's the only begotten Son of God, that we are all sons and daughters of the divine. We're all created of the divine. So that's the little separation. We don't believe that we have to go through Jesus to get to God. We have immediate and instant access to God within us already, just as Jesus taught. So Holmes is very big on the teaching of Jesus. The Science of Mind, probably half of the book is dedicated to explanation of the teachings and the parables and so forth of Jesus. And so we're very big on that teaching, just not that he was the only person that was available to it.
There's the answer. He was not the only.
Yeah, no, we're all sons and daughters of God. And if we allowed ourselves to have the consciousness and take the expansion that he took, to know spirit within us at the level that he did, this and much more you will do also. And in reality, we're doing more than he did in many ways. I mean, we can save lives through science and technology and medicine and so forth. So, we do it differently, but we're doing more. And I think that was the more he was referring to, is that we're going to have this growth and expansion of our consciousness, our intelligence, intellect, and awareness.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I have something.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would like to hear from you about just the whole magi and the stars. I love the stars and I love astrology, and I've always been very fascinated with that one star that and just the whole word magi
Mm-hmm.
and that
Magic.
stuff.
Magic.
Yes.
Yes, it's postulated that they were magicians, that they were astronomers, astrologers, astronomers, whichever, and that they read the stars, they followed the stars. That's how they navigated, was by the stars. And it wasn't necessarily that this star was leading them, come on, but that they were tracking with the star as far as direct navigation, as far as navigation. So yeah, there's really no mention that there was three of them. Could have been one, could have been two, could have been 20. One group went to the king, and the other group didn't go to the. So it just depends on which version, Matthew or Luke, that you're reading, as far as what you're going to get from that. I think the message of the Magi is the recognition of honoring the birth, honoring that light of consciousness that was coming, and the gifts are again an honoring of that and a recognition of this birth of light and consciousness into the world. Yeah, so I think that's what and those were very rare and valuable gifts back in that time. The gold, of course, was the currency, and the frankincense and myrrh were spices that they used in many, many things, including embalming bodies. But yeah. Yeah, yeah. That answer?
Yeah.
All right. What else, Beth?
You just triggered a fun thing about light that I was just reading in the Science of Mind guide that I subscribed to the magazine every month. But for your question about the stars, I don't know if many of you know, ASU has this fabulous Department of Earth and Space Sciences, and you can sign up. They do presentations on Zoom about the stars every other Wednesday. And they've done a presentation about where the Earth was at that time, where the constellations were at that time, and what they probably were seeing from that perspective in Jerusalem at that time, which stars, which planets, which constellations. So it's fun if you love the stars. That Marston, it's Marston Theater at ASU. They do it live now. They didn't during COVID. They shut the live ones down, but they're still doing them by Zoom. But anyway, the fun story from Science of Mind magazine about light and how you all shine. That when you think about a bright moon, especially growing up in Seattle with snow on the ground, it's really bright moons and it lights up the whole ground because of the reflecting off the snow. But then you realize the moon has no light of its own. It's the reflection from the sun. And we all shine the love light of God, that it shines through us, in us, around us, and we reflect God's love light. So I just love that thought.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
There's an interesting movie if you want to look at the dynamics between astrology and Jesus and everything. It's called Zeitgeist. It's a weird name, Zeitgeist, Zeitgeist, and it talks about the whole thing when it comes to Jesus and how a lot of the Bible has been based on a lot of astrology symbols and things. It's very interesting. Yeah, check it out.
Thank you, Joe. A wealth of information this morning. Mark?
I had a question about the chronology thing you had mentioned. I am not familiar with the Jewish faith at all, and just the 300 years and Christmas, and I had heard, I'd never studied into it, that the actual birth that we celebrate it's not actually during the time, and that it's it had evolved into much more of a money-making thing, a slow time of the year, and a commercial thing. And I didn't know if there was any validity to that. So
Perhaps later on. But earlier, as I understand it, it was the Roman holiday of Saturna, celebration of the god Saturn. Saturn, I believe it's called. And that was a rather rollicking festival that they had every year around this same time. Also, the solstice is celebrated at this time. And as Christianity became the religion, there was a lot of push and pull tug against paganism is wrong, and the pagans thought Christianity was wrong, and the Romans thought Christianity, and Constantine went, enough of this, I'm a Christian, we're Christians. And that was the stake in the ground. And so the debauchery that occurred in the other festival, the servants became the masters, and the masters became the servants, and all sorts of fun things were happening. And so they started gradually getting rid of that celebration and changing that to the Christmas celebration. And it became much more somber, much more reflective time, and so forth from what the old celebrations were. As that's my understanding. Lee, you're nodding, so he's of the same understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch more, but
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, that's a starting spot. Valerie.
Why is it the gift of giving? Why did that become part of this commercial art of giving? Where did that derive from?
Hallmark. No, I don't know that. I know Christmas cards are Hallmark. You know, that came from Central Europe, St. Nicholas and all of that. And it started out with St. Nick coming to houses and giving food, basically, to the kids, oranges and chocolates and things like that. And then the Krampus character looks like the devil, frankly. I mean, he really does. Pretty scary. But he would go with Santa and take the bad kids away. So that's where you better be nice, not naughty, and all that song. Yeah, because Krampus was part of Santa Claus, but the funny pictures back in the old day, Santa looks like the Pope to the point of a pointy hat and a cross on his back, and Krampus looks like the devil with a tail and horns. So it's really confusing. But yeah, Saint Nick would do that, and there was something about shoes by the fire, and all sorts of old folklore tales. And that all came out of paganism with the mistletoe, the Yule logs, and all of that, bringing in the branches of the tree inside because it was evergreen, and it was encouraging that rebirth of spring, return of the light. So a lot of history in the pagan realm that you can see transfers into Christianity, and it's a blending. It's a blending. Well, yeah, there's been a thing for a long, long time about put the Christ back in Christmas and get rid of all this stuff, but all that stuff is part of it, and really, it's what's in our hearts. What's in our hearts, and is it the connecting with each other and in community? And why do we give gifts? Do we give out of obligation? Do we give out of love? Do we expect something in return, or are we giving just because we want to give? And that's the gift in community when we really bring it back to that and giving our hearts to each other, giving our love to each other, and sharing that and being here for each other. I mean, we've all had our challenges this year, and we've all been there for each other, phone calls and prayers and all of the things that we do for each other. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. All right. One last question. Anybody? One last comment? We're good? All right. Well, I would say let's do a prayer, and then let's let Miss Lily sing us another beautiful song this morning. Oh, you're going to have to fix that, dear. All right. Would you join me for an affirmative prayer? How good it is that we come together in community, in the love that we are, in this love that we share. As we recognize that love is God, for God is love that loves so much it created all that is. It is that which is the light And while it may appear to us that it is diminishing this time of year, we know on the other side of the world it is bright summer. And that's how it works. The light is never diminished. For the light of God is in our hearts. We are that which it is that which we are. We live, move, and have our being in it as it does through us. We are the presence of the divine in form. Whole, perfect, and complete in this manifestation. There is no separation. There is nothing broken. There's nothing missing. Whole, perfect, and complete. And that's the mystical. Even though it may seem at times there's parts that are broken or a bit wobbly, we're whole, we are complete. And so I speak my word first this morning, knowing this unity that we are, knowing that our hearts are open to this season in anticipation, expectation of the return of the light, of the birth of the Christ consciousness through us and as the divinity of God expands within us, our awareness of it. I know that we are each infinitely blessed during this holiday season. I know that this community is blessed by the presence of each and every one that is here online and joining us in the future, any that have joined us ever in the past. For we're all united in this unity and this oneness now. And it is so comforting to know that we're here for each other. That's the purpose, that's the point. We are together, we are one. And I know for anyone that may have something on their heart this day that they are seeking prayer around, as they lift it into the consciousness of this prayer here and now, that this community in its love holds that in the light, knowing the healing, the blessing, the prosperity, the circulation, whatever it might be, that it is healed in this moment. And how grateful I am for this knowing, how grateful I am for this truth, and how grateful I am for this community. As I release this prayer into the action of law, knowing that it is done, and we affirm together, and so it is.